walk into a reception area or a foyer or a front part of a business or an organization or building, even one that I know really well and I'm very familiar with, I've always had this feeling like I need to ask permission to enter, beyond that front room. And it's a very strong sense that I've had, and I've often wondered why. And I recently figured it out. My mom would have been 69 years old. She passed away a couple years ago, but her birthday was last week. And oftentimes when it's become around my mom's birthday time, I've started just reflecting a bit more on, why I am who I am, or what I've gotten from my mom, or what about her is sort of in me, that kind of thing. Well, I was thinking this week about my mom since it was her birthday, and it brought to mind some interesting memories and things that used to happen. A little description of my mom will help. My mom was usually there. Like when I got home from school, Mom was usually there. When I had to go to practice, Mom was there to take me. When I had a place to go or a thing to do, Mom was there. When I first learned to drive, Mom took me in the car and taught me to drive that first time. I mean, Mom was like always there. So I remember that I spent a lot of time with Mom. But the reverse was also true. I tagged along with my mom a lot of the time. She didn't just help me out, but I was with her a lot of the time. And most of her free time was wrapped up in volunteering and serving at our church. So oftentimes after school, she would take me over to church and we would do whatever project she had in store for the day. And we got to know people in our church fairly well because of that. Well, the way our church worked at the time is you walked through about half the church and then you got to the church office. And we would always walk into the church office and the same receptionist was always there. Her name was Barbara. And we would always say hello to Barbara, and she got to know us better and better over all those years that we would come to the church. And my mom would always have a project. It was making copies, it was talking to somebody or meeting with somebody or organizing something or whatever it was. But we would always enter into the church through the church office. We would speak with Barbara, and then my mom would let her know what we were planning to do. And she would say, oh, well, come on back, and you can do that thing. The way you got from the reception area to the rest of the church was through one of those half doors, or those servant doors, or whatever you call them. Dutch door. Thank you, Dutch door. So they would have one of these doors, and the trick, though, was that when you're in the reception area and you grab the doorknob, it's locked. But the doorknob on the other side was unlocked. So you can't get in, but you can get out easily. So over time, it changed from Barbara coming and opening the door for us to Barbara saying, oh, just reach over the door and turn the knob and walk right in. We never were allowed to reach over the door and open the door without Barbara's permission. Even though we wanted to. And we thought, we own this place. We're here. We can do it. We can reach over. My mom said, no. You will never reach over that door and turn that doorknob and walk in yourself. Because it's a matter of respect. It's where you are, and you need to have that level of respect. And I discovered that's why I do what I do in those situations. And it brings to mind that we all do the things we do for a reason. So why is it that we do the things that we do? Why do we do what we do? We do the things we do for all kinds of reasons, and asking that question is probably one of the most important questions. Why do I do what I do? And most people think that it's a very important question. It's not just Jesus who thought it was important, or the Bible who thought it was important. I mean, some very popular and important people think that this is a very valuable question. Steve Jobs said, the only way to do great work is to love what you do. If you haven't found it, keep looking. Don't settle. In other words, why do you do these things? An author and speaker and kind of business guru said, your why is the most important thing you can figure out right now. It's the reason you do the things that you are passionate about. If you don't know that, you can never completely fulfill your personal and professional dreams. And then somebody, nobody knows who, but somebody said, what you do matters, But why you do what you do matters so much more. Knowing why, it sustains us. Knowing why it carries us through. Knowing why can even pull us out of a slump sometimes when we need to be pulled out. Because we have that sense of, this is why I do this thing. And now I know it's deep and it's meaningful and it's purposeful. Well, what's really interesting is the Apostle Paul addresses this exact question in the book of Philippians. It seems as though there's a situation when he's asking people to do something, and then he tells them, now if you're going to do that, here's why you do this. So what he's asking them to do is first, and what he asks them to do is, don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble. Thinking of others is better than yourselves. Don't look out only for your own interests, but take an interest in others too. Apparently they were having some problems doing this. Being united, being selfless, working together, whatever it is that was going on. And so he charged them with, this is what you need to do. But I appreciate that Paul didn't just say, here's what you need to do, but he gave them that why behind it. Because it's not just for the greater good, or it's not just because it's the right thing to do, or because somebody told you to do it. He gives them the, why does it matter? Why do we do these things? And so here's what he says. He said, you must have the same attitude that Christ Jesus had. Christ was truly God, that he did not try to remain equal with God. Instead, he gave up everything and became a slave when he became like one of us. Christ was humble. He obeyed God and even died on the cross. Then God gave Christ the highest place and honored his name above all others. So in the name of Jesus, everyone will bow down, those in heaven, on earth, and under the earth. And to the glory of God the Father, everyone will openly agree Jesus Christ is Lord. So it's like for Paul, everything circles back to Christ. I don't think Paul could think of anything that he's doing without thinking, how does this factor into my relationship with Christ? Or how does Jesus inform what I'm doing here? And I think he's doing the same thing here. He's saying do these things, but here's why you do these things. And he's not asking us to necessarily copy Jesus, because the actions that he puts in here are impossible. I think these are big, cosmic, epic kinds of truths of things Jesus did. What is the thing that Paul's asking us to copy? He's asking us to copy Jesus' attitude. And what is Jesus' attitude about in this passage? Well, it's about giving up everything. This phrase, giving up everything, literally means poured out or emptied himself. I mean, Jesus basically got rid of everything in order to come and be with us. I find it interesting that there are more books and more articles and more scholarly kinds of theological things that have happened around this phrase than almost any other in the New Testament. People have tried to figure out, what does it actually mean that Jesus emptied himself and got rid of everything to become like us? And people have poured so much time trying to figure it out. And does it say what Jesus got rid of to become human? Does it say? Everything, but specifically what did he give up? I don't know. We have no idea what he gave up, but he gave up everything. He gave up whatever it took so that he could be like us. So the beginning part of his attitude is he gave up everything. And then it says that he was humble. He was humble so that he could become like us. Imagine for a second that you're Jesus. Imagine for a second that you're God. And I know for some of you that might be easier than others to imagine that you're God, but just for a second, take a stretch and imagine that you're God just for a moment. Imagine that you have all the power in the world, you have all of the ability, you have all the knowledge, you have all the eternity in your mind, you have all the wisdom and everything that could ever exist, and you love being God, and you have all the joy from being God. And that's just who and what you are. And then, your job is completely different, and you have to get rid of all of that to help out the people that you've created. I mean, that's what Jesus did. He somehow gave up everything, and that was his act of humility. To give it up so that he could come and be with us. So Jesus' attitude was this: I'm getting rid of whatever it takes to be with my creations, to help them. Well, then it says Jesus obeyed. He obeyed God. Now, he obeyed God to do something. He didn't just obey God generally. He obeyed God to do something. Because God had plans for what Jesus was doing. And Jesus followed those plans by obeying. So Jesus' attitude was, I'm going to be humble and get rid of everything. I'm going to submit to God's plans, and I'm going to obey the plans that God has laid out for me. And that was Jesus' attitude. Then Paul tells the rest of the story. Then God gave Christ the highest place and honored his name above all others, so that at the name of Jesus, everyone would bow down, those in heaven, on earth, and under the earth, and to the glory of God the Father, everyone will openly agree that Jesus Christ is Lord. Jesus gave up everything, was humble, was obedient, did all this. That was his attitude and his perspective, because God had a plan for him, and God has plans that were laid out for him. He gave it up for the sake of God's plans, trusting that those plans were good and were the best kinds of plans for him. What I love is at the end of this passage, God gives the results of the plans. God shows what's happening because Christ was humble, because Christ was obedient, because Christ did all these things. God shows the result of the plans, which was everyone would agree that Jesus Christ is Lord. Now, when I read that, I think just because of what's happening right now with our Bible club, all of a sudden my ears just perked up. Because that phrase, Jesus Christ is Lord, is something that is very similar to what the kids have been learning. And I actually think the volunteers have been learning some of the same things too in the Bible club. But what has been happening has been so much fun, because these kids have been laughing and they're dancing and they're singing and they're doing games and activities. And they're also learning some really cool stuff. One of the things that they recently learned was that there's a difference, as we've mentioned before and seen before, in the Bible between when Lord is in all capital letters and when Lord is in lowercase letters. Because the kids have been learning all these different names for God. They've been meeting God through the different names that the Bible gives for God. And the capital letter Lord and the lowercase letter Lord are different names for God. So the kids have learned that the capital letter, L-O-R-D, capital Lord, is one name for God, and that's when God says, I am. That's God's kind of personal name. That's like I would talk to you and meet you and call you by your first name. That's what they would do. They would call God by God's first name, very personally. That's God, I am. And so when we see capital letter L-O-R-D, we can think, that's God's personal I am name. Well, then there's the lowercase L-O-R-D, the lowercase letter Lord, and that's a completely different name. And that name is this name that means master, kind of like our master over here. This is calling God master. And what kind of attitude does it take to call somebody a master? The kind of stuff that Jesus was just talking about. Humble and obedient and giving up everything so that I can say, God, you are my master. And if God's our master, then we submit to God's plans. Why does Paul want people to do these things that he's calling them to do? What is it about Jesus' attitude that Paul wants them to copy? What is it about Jesus' attitude that shows them, oh, this is why I do what I do? Well, God had plans for them, and Paul wants to say, why you do what you do is because God has great plans, and if you are humble and obedient to God's plans, then that's the attitude that God wants. God wants us to submit to God's plans. And having that attitude, that forms the why we do the things we do. Now I wonder, if we took kind of that truth and we connected it to kind of what we do, how we spend our time, what routines we have, where we work, how we act, what choices we make, all the kinds of things we do, how does Jesus' attitude of trusting that God has great plans for us, how does that attitude form and inform what we do? If we ask, why do I do what I do? Because God has great plans, and I'm trying to be part of God's plans. Why do you make that choice that is so strange that nobody else is making? Well, because God created me, and I believe that God has plans for my life, and so I'm going to treat my life and my time and my body in the way that Jesus wants me to. So why is it that you spend your time doing those things? Because I think God has great plans, and I want to be part of this thing that God is doing. I mean, this why can actually inform what we do and how we do it. Why you and I do what we do can be impacted by the attitude that Jesus had. In another place where Paul wrote, he answered this specific question for himself. It's like somebody came up to him and said, Paul, why do you do what you do? And he answers it by saying, God compels me to preach the good news. And that's what Paul did. He preached the good news. That was his life. But he said, God compels me. I mean, what if God's plans were clear and we were so convinced that they were good that God compels us to do these things? I mean, it's like somebody would come up to us and say, so why do you do what you do? And what if we had such a ready, clear answer? And it might not be God compels me, or it might not be because God has great plans. It might be some other wording or some other way. But what if we had that kind of an answer and that ready response? What I think is particularly fun, because it's very challenging to ask ourselves those questions, but I think what's particularly fun is to ask somebody else those questions and see what they say. We were at a nonprofit event helping out with it on Wednesday night this week. And it was a group of people, some of whom we knew and some of whom we didn't. And it was really interesting and it's enjoyable to meet some new people. So I was talking with a group of people, and some of whom I knew and one of whom I didn't. And so I introduced myself to the person that I didn't know. And we started talking briefly, and she and her husband had just recently retired from something. And I said, well, so tell me about that. And she told me what they had done during their lives for probably 40 years of their career together. And I found it really interesting. And so I said, so why did you do that? Why did you spend your whole life doing that? And it was fascinating. I was fascinated to hear her response. And I just thought as she was talking, wow, what would my response be if somebody said, why do you do what you do? So what I was thinking is, let's practice. So if you would, take 2 to 4 minutes, find somebody, not your spouse or not the person you came with, and or not somebody in your family. Find somebody else and ask them, why do you do what you do? And it could be, why do you work at the job you work at? Why do you make the decisions you make? Why do you have the hobbies you have? Why do you, whatever it is. But why do you do something that you do? Ask them. And find out, why do you do what you do? Ready? Go! You can get up, you can move around, find somebody. I'll call you back together in a minute.